So basically, Lelantus works similarly as what I mentioned before. You take certain coins, you kind of destroy them, but at any time in the future, you can redeem them for brand new ones with no previous transaction history. That means these coins look as if they've been freshly mined, or well, they
Mhm.
just don't have any transaction history associated with them. And I guess the beauty about Lelantus is that you can burn arbitrary amounts. Like I can burn like 10.76 coins and then redeem 5.3 coins. I mean, those who are familiar with Dash,
Mhm.
you knows that when they were doing private
Mhm.
send, you're actually breaking down your transaction into fixed denominations, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we are currently using currently with Sigma, which is a predecessor to Lelantus. But
Mhm.
with Lelantus, we don't need to use fixed denominations anymore because we have ways to hide the amounts and to hide the
Mhm.
commitments. So there's no requirement for fixed denominations, which has a huge improvement on privacy.
This episode is sponsored by Nordvpn. I've been using Nordvpn for years since it doesn't log your data, has over 5,300 super fast servers in 59 countries, and I can pay in my favorite cryptocurrency, Dash, which is important since I'm unbanked. Take back your online privacy. Sign up now with the promo code DCN and get 68% off, or just $3.71 per month, plus an additional month free. Go to nordvpn.org/DCN or use the coupon code DCN. Hey everyone, I have the awesome pleasure today of speaking with the one and only Reuben Yap, project steward of Zcoin. How's it going, Reuben?
Doing great early morning, but excited to have a chat with you again. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It was about 9 months ago we spoke last, and things changed pretty quickly in the world of cryptocurrency. But now you mentioned that Zcoin is working on something different, a different approach from the decoy approach. So
Mhm.
before I go into what exactly that is, what are the main, schools of thought, as it were, the main approaches to how to keep transactions private in cryptocurrency? There's the decoy
Mm.
approach, and then what else is there?
Well, I
The
mean,
major
for
ones, right?
us, yeah, the major ones. Well, there's actually several different flavors of the decoy ones. I mean,
Hmm.
CoinJoin is a decoy one. Basically, well, kind of where you're like mixing with other people, while
Hmm.
Monero. So when you say mixing with other people, it means everyone says I want to mix, and then we
Hmm.
have to actively, say yes, I want to mix, right?
Hmm.
And that's what we call interactive model, where people actually have to actively participate, and that's also used in Bitcoin and all this other stuff. So Monero is also a decoy model where you're trying to find other people to add noise into your transaction. So what that means is that your real transaction is still in there. It's just kind of hidden with additional plausible sources and plausible destinations.
Hmm.
And there is non-interactive where the other users don't actually have to like actively mix. It's just taken from the blockchain. Those people don't even have to be online. So that's a non-interactive and a
Hmm.
decoy model. Mimblewimble, it's kind of like a hybrid between the two, where basically everyone who kind of wants to make a transaction then gets all their transactions bundled into a mega transaction, where then it's almost like a massive coin join that's happening on a per block level. So I
Hmm.
guess it's like semi in between the two. I think those are the three main decoy mechanisms. And then there are like the ZKP type of model where, well, for us, it's about burning coins and then redeeming them for brand new ones with no previous transaction history. And with Zcash, it's more of using zero knowledge proofs to prove that a valid transaction has happened, but without giving any other information about it. It
Hmm.
uses all these like ZKP circuits and stuff like that. So Lelantus also has something which Zcoin does, also has something similar where I can pass the right to redeem to someone else. But I think these are the main privacy models, excluding the layer 2 solutions like
Hmm.
Lightning or Bolt or whatever those are. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're speaking about Lelantus, and now for the probably most people listening wouldn't be necessarily too familiar with that. I know we did
Mm.
speak, was it late December or so, and you mentioned that that was upcoming in Zcoin. So has it been implemented yet?
I think we're gonna launch testnet sometime next week. So fingers
So
crossed.
very
And
close.
yeah,
So
very close.
how does Lantis work for people who aren't familiar?
So basically, Lelantus works similarly as what I mentioned before. You take certain coins, you kind of destroy them, but at any time in the future, you can redeem them for brand new ones with no previous transaction history. That means these coins look as if they've been freshly mined, or well, they
Hmm.
just don't have any transaction history associated with them. And I guess the beauty about Lelantus is that you can burn arbitrary amounts. Like I can burn like 10.76 coins and then redeem 5.3 coins. I mean, those who are familiar with Dash,
Hmm.
it knows that when they were doing your coin join, or what do you call that again, your private
Hmm.
send, you're actually breaking down your transaction into fixed denominations, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we are currently using currently with Sigma, which is a predecessor to Lelantus.
Hmm.
But with Lelantus, we don't need to use fixed denominations anymore because we have ways to hide the amounts and to hide the
Hmm.
commitments. So there's no requirement for fixed denominations, which has a huge improvement on privacy. Lelantus also allows the right, like, because I can burn and then I can redeem, right? But I
Hmm.
can also pass that right to redeem to someone else. So let's say I burn like 10.3 coins and I want to give you the right to redeem 5.2 coins, and I can pass that right to you. I don't even have to redeem it. I just pass that right to you, and you can redeem it, or you can pass that right to redeem to someone else. So that's like a very, very high type of anonymity set. And Lelantus does this with no trusted setup, no fancy crypto. And it's a pretty innovative solution as it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you put things into the burn state and then others get taken out, and it's not, the
Mm.
amounts don't have to match up, but they all have to be at least, you have to put in at least as much as you end up taking out, right? You can't put in like
Correct.
2 coins and then you just make 8 coins. That would be a little bit weird.
Correct. Yeah, but you could be
Hmm.
placing many others, right? Like, I mean,
Hmm.
as so one of the things that we are going to move on is privacy on by default, but with transparent opt out. Such a long mouthful. But the idea
Hmm.
is that all our official wallets, whenever funds come in, it would just anonymize it. So that like increases the pool of all this anonymity stuff. And when you're redeeming, it isn't really clear like from which input it came in. Could it come from many of these input? It could come from a combination of inputs.
Hmm.
So it's going to be a pretty hard to say like, oh yeah, it's this one, right? And we also have certain limits as to the largest amount that you can anonymize. Like if you anonymize like 1 million coins, right, and in
Yeah.
one chunk, and then you redeem 1 million coins, obviously you're the only person with one input. You're obviously
Yes.
going to be the only person. So we also limit like the maximum you can anonymize in one like mint is 1001 coins. So yeah.
Yeah. And so obviously, this is a great way of keeping people from being able to see when looking at the blockchain where stuff moves to, because it disappears, it goes boom, and then just
Yeah.
it reappears and there's not enough to correlate. But in order to do that, obviously some kind of information has to be passed, as in how do you keep track of how much is in the burn state, how much is associated with each person in the burn state, and where this person decided to birth the coins out of that. Where does that data reside or happen?
The data still resides on chain. It's more of like whenever I'm burning, I am making a commitment to the chain. How do I explain this? It's
Hmm.
kind of like, yes, I burned this amount.
Hmm.
And that's what we call like a Peterson commitment, and along with a commitment to a certain amount. So everyone can see the entry into the anonymity pool, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I pull it out, I'm using what we call a cryptographic primitive called one out of many proofs. And the
Mm-hmm.
basic idea is to produce a proof that I was one of these people that committed
Mm-hmm.
to the one of the people that made the burn, and therefore I allow you the right to transfer or to redeem those coins. So that's all still held on chain. It's just that that information doesn't say where the source is. It just relies on the math to say that, yep, this proof checks out, and you have the right. There's one thing that's kind of keeps track, which is whenever you try to redeem or you try to transfer your amount, a serial number is posted on the blockchain, which kind of prevents you from using the same commitment twice. But
Mm-hmm.
that serial number, although it's posted on the blockchain, does not, just from looking at the serial number, you have no idea which commitment it came from. It's kind of
Mm.
like a hash or something like that, right?
Yeah.
I hope that explains it well. Of
Yeah.
course, we have in terms of the amounts, we use bulletproofs for that, and
Mm-hmm.
we have our own. So when we are talking about hidden amounts, you have to have a balance proof. That means, you know, one side of the transaction, the other side of the transaction has to be equal. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing you need to have is also what we call a range proof, which is where the bulletproofs come in, which is to prove that there are no negative numbers. Because obviously,
Mm-hmm.
if I put a negative number, I can make the balance
Yeah.
equal, create coins out of thin air, and there are no numbers that are infinity. So you can use bulletproofs. Basically, they just serve as the range proofs to prove that I'm not having a negative number or a number that's above without showing you the number. That's the best way I can explain it.
Yeah. And it seems like so all that data is there, but there's no connections between them. And you don't, because of the way the proofs work, you don't need to have a connection to know it's true. So
Yes.
you can just say, you know, is this proof, is this withdrawal request, for lack of a better term, is it valid? Does the person have the right to withdraw this much from the burn state? And at the, it's yes or no. And it's not, well, how much do they have? Like, you don't need to know that at all. It just,
Yeah.
yes or no, does it work or not?
It's kind of like if I go to a fun fair, I go to the
Mm-hmm.
ticket counter, I pay some money, and it gives me a receipt, right? And then, well,
Mm-hmm.
a receipt or a ticket, and then I go to the entry booth, and then you just need to see the ticket, right? But the
Yeah.
ticket, when I see the ticket, it's a receipt, it's a proof that I paid, but he
Mm-hmm.
doesn't actually have to see like, oh, what exact notes you actually paid at the counter, right? So I guess this is like a imperfect analogy, but the proofs are kind of like a receipt that you did pay without showing like the exact amount of coins that you put in or the exact notes that you put in, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so I remember hearing discussion on when you're talking about transparent blockchains versus opaque blockchains, and the something called the inflation bug problem, where any cryptocurrency can have, and there's, I believe it happened even in Bitcoin pretty early on, a bug where a bunch of different coins can get created way faster, and essentially you just overinflate the supply. And of course, if you're watching a transparent blockchain, you can catch that and fix it. And it's more challenging if you have an opaque blockchain where you can't actually just see it and you don't necessarily know for 100% sure the entire coin supply. Is that still a problem with Lelantus? And if so, how big of a problem might it be?
Um, so this is a great question. And I think the easy summary of it is that this is the problem with supply auditability. Now, Zcoin
Mm-hmm.
has its fair share of having this problem, so we know what we're talking about because we went through it. Not in a good way, but
Yeah.
I kind of have a very nuanced a viewpoint on this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because okay, now for the record, inflation busts have happened in Bitcoin twice. One
Mm-hmm.
which was exploited, which was the value overflow incident that I think like 1 trillion of coins were created out of thin air. And another one, which was I think probably 2 years ago, where there was an inflation bug, but it was not exploited.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think I remember that because everything that backported from Bitcoin had that bug as well, and then
correct, correct.
there was some kind of I believe there was some kind of controversy about not everyone being informed of it in time or something, but I can't remember
Yeah,
specifically.
but I was thinking like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
like back then when the value overflow incident happened with Bitcoin, yes, they could
Mm-hmm.
detect it, but there were hardly any exchange infrastructure there, right? There
Mm-hmm.
was hardly anything. There's only a few players, and you could just coordinate and say, "Up, okay, I'm hard forking," and we all move it, and no damage was done, right? I mean that. But in the scenario today, if an
Mm-hmm.
inflation bug happened, let's say if you created like, okay, suddenly 10 million, or let's say 1 trillion coins, right? And like stuff goes into exchanges and stuff like that. And even if you say the exchanges don't, having dealt with exchanges, a lot of exchanges don't have full information of who their customers are. And once it
Mm-hmm.
starts trading on it, it almost it's like a laundry of a certain sort. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
with Binance, 2 Bitcoin, you can create like many sock puppet two Bitcoin accounts. You can go and move to another exchange. So let's say once this money starts entering into the exchange and already has been traded, and it may be even traded with sock puppets, right? How are you going to say that I'm going to stop it? It's still
Mm.
game over to me, right? It
Yeah.
really is. Like, what are you going to say? Exchanges, you have to absorb this. That
Yeah.
also kills the project.
So you could probably
So
fix the problem with the actual blockchain, but you've caused a lot of carnage and a lot of businesses that have given out a lot of money in exchange for coins that now just don't exist anymore. And yeah, it's a little of a sad situation.
yeah, so when you talk about supply auditability,
Hmm.
I'm like, does it actually matter in a real case scenario? Especially like stuff with lightning, I go bum 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 bum.
Hmm.
What the heck are you going to do, right? You say it's instant, I can pull it out.
Yeah.
It's your the You may be able to de-anonymize it later, but at the speed that is happening, exchanges are not going to be able to react in time unless super coordinate. I think this is kind of one of the problems of decentralization as well, right?
Hmm.
um so with Lelantus, I guess we're approaching it in two phases because we also realize this risk, right? And the first one is when we first launched Lelantus, we would have the ability. Uh, Basically, we are not going to enable the ability to pass that right to redeem to someone else. So that means whenever you burn, you have to bring it back into the transparent blockchain. But yes, the transparent blockchain is no previous transaction history. So there's already a good
Hmm.
amount of anonymity there. There's also kind of like an emergency limiter where if because you can see the amounts that are going in and you can see the amounts that are going out, right?
Yeah.
And it always has to go in and always has to go out. So if the amount goes out is more than the amount that goes in, the Lelantus systems just by code just shuts down and prevents any additional anonymization transactions because
Hmm.
something is wrong, right? So no coins will be created out of thin air, but some legitimate people may lose their funds inside the
Yeah.
Lelantus transaction. Yeah, I mean that makes sense, right?
Hmm.
So because that we are not allowing the right to pass that right to redeem to someone else, we can still have this kind of stopgap.
Hmm.
We also have we're gonna have a temporary 1 year SPOC, which gives the admin, basically the core developers, the right to shut down Lelantus for a period of 1 year. I mean,
Hmm.
this switch is only activated for 1 year and then it automatically goes off. It's not perfect, but we think it's just prudent.
Hmm.
And these are the ways that we're trying to mitigate the risk. There's no 100%, right? We've gone through cryptographic audits with the best people. I mean, Trail of Bits, ABTK Consulting. We've really done our best. The best test is of us maturity, but we want to have some a little bit of control before we say let's all go full blown. Now you can pass the right to redeem, and if something goes wrong, it is going to be really, 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 really hard for us to fix something. So we're kind of like letting the reins go little by little rather than just letting it go straight away. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I mean, obviously that's a very prudent thing, and I think that my personal opinion is too many blockchain projects are reckless. Too many just say, "Oh yeah, this is great," and they just like launch it, and then a bunch of crazy things happen. And I mean, just the amount of scams and other things in the space, I think makes gives the burden on us to just try to be squeaky clean and very careful. So what are some of the so it seems like this is a very innovative system for basically ensuring some of the best privacy you can realistically have. Nothing's perfect. What are some of the drawbacks to it that aren't related to privacy necessarily? Like, for example, is it more difficult to use? Is it more difficult to prove a transaction came from you if you're like you used a legitimate purpose for it? Is it like harder to account for or harder to integrate into software to like point of sale systems to figure like what are kind of factors like that might be different?
Well, in terms of, well, first of all, because all privacy has a cost in scalability. I mean, transactions are like 1.5 kilobytes ish or to 2 kilobytes. When a transparent transaction is like 50, 60 bytes. So it is significantly larger. That's one thing. The computational cost to do a transaction is also high in relative sense. For individual user, that's not a problem. If I'm making like a few transactions, I can wait like 6 or 7 seconds, right? But if I'm making thousands of transactions as one person, that thing can take minutes. That's also a drawback. But for regular users, it doesn't quite matter. Like, yeah, you can wait 3-4 seconds. That's not a big deal. But if you're doing like thousands and thousands and thousands of transactions, that 3 or 4 seconds is like multiplied by, how many transactions you have, right? Verification is also more intensive. It's still competitive, but it's obviously a magnitude slower than what Bitcoin does. But because we also use a masternode infrastructure, we can have, say, like, oh yeah, bump up your requirements to verify, to verify more transactions, have a multi-core type of thing. So in terms of like exchanges adopting it, at this level of where Zcoin is, I mean, even Monero is the number one privacy blockchain in terms of market cap. Has issues, had a long time had issues to get exchanges to support it because there's just all this additional work and all that stuff. I think it's going to be even more difficult for Zcoin to do that because especially with the additional computation requirements to do these private transactions, which is kind of why we kind of left the transparent transactions as an opt-out. Like, yeah, exchanges, you want to use a private your transparent transactions just like Bitcoin, go ahead and do that. But for the average user, everything is anonymized. But every time I redeem, like when I do a redemption into like a Binance address or whatever, the exchange doesn't really have to do anything extra. It's just a transaction that looks like it's been freshly mined. So that I guess is the drawback.
Yeah. So for example, in the case of an exchange, say if an exchange only does transparent ones, then you send a coin to yourself and it just comes out of the sky, right? It looks like it comes from nowhere, and then you just go from there to the exchange. If they say, wait, where did this come from? I mean, you could just say like, it looks like you mined it, basically. Like it looks like,
well, you can tell that it wasn't mine, but what
similar.
I'm saying is that if they want to support Zcoin, and if everyone's using this anonymization technique, the majority of the deposits they're going to get will be in this form, right? So if they say that, oh, well, 60-70% of our people are using this transaction, we're going to block them all, they're going to lose business as well, right? We're kind of trying to like, I think it's still an experiment. I mean, like, hey, they still support Monero, they still support all this stuff, which is even like private by default. So I don't think we're going to get kicked back into it. We're trying to ease into it. and see what happens, because I think it's going to be unrealistic for them to say we're not going to accept your private transactions, especially once we go private by default on all our user wallets. Yeah.
Yeah, and that, like, for those who had just kind of came into crypto recently, I do remember, I've been using other than Bitcoin coins since like 2016 or 2015, and
Mm-hmm.
I remember when Monero was nowhere. They didn't have any mobile wallets, and a bunch of exchanges, they didn't really have much traction on almost any exchange. And I remember that Jax was trying to integrate them, and they just gave up after a while. They're just like, this is too
Yep.
much. We're wasting so much time and resources on this one coin. We could be doing so much else. And they stopped. And also, I remember in terms of when I was using Dash a lot, and this isn't even privacy technology where it might be more difficult, but just to recognize instant send that, transactions are locked in right away. It took forever. And even now, there's only like
Yep.
20 or so exchanges that do. And
Yep.
finally, was it last week or this week rather? Um, a Dash Core group got a partnership of all the exchanges that accept that and called this program like the Fast Pass program.
Yep.
And if you have a little badge on it and you're Fast Pass, just to try to get more exchanges on board because they're just so lazy on doing this kind of thing. Now, one thing that I think that Monero did smart on this is if you basically just say our special feature is this privacy, and if you want to integrate Monero at all, you need to integrate the full spectrum of its privacy, basically. And so it's like a binary thing. It's like a like a
Yep.
game theory thing where they're just saying you want to profit from trading this thing, well then you need to
Yep.
integrate the whole way. Whereas something like Dash had like an opt-in, like, well, this you can recognize it like a regular Bitcoin transaction, but you can also recognize this little extra flag. So
Yep.
do you think that it will? Do you think that Zcoin's new approach of having the opt-in transparency is going to just result in all exchanges only accepting that?
Uh, I mean, to me, realistically, all the exchanges they're not going to support it. I mean, off
Hmm.
the bat. I mean, we are like what 130 in market cap. It doesn't really make sense, for them to expand resources to do it right now. And the idea is like we need to gain much more traction. Actually, in a way, like Monero was also very lucky because they were almost the only ones that time. It was basically Darkcoin, Dash, and
Hmm.
Monero, right? As far as I remember. And of course, like Monero went like the very purist route, and Dash kind of said like, oh, like, we're not just about privacy now, we're more about payments and stuff. So obviously, Monero
Yeah.
was the only one that kind of like dominated the privacy scene, right?
Yeah. And even when
And
Zcash came around, Zcash was still 99% or whatever transparent
yeah,
transactions. And it seemed, in my estimation, to be more of like a research project than you're trying to create this digital cash that everyone's going to use anonymously. It seemed to be more they're just like building tech rather than trying to build a currency that's going to be used. And maybe that's just like, you know, an impression, but whatever it is, the impression was if you're going to use a super secret anonymous stuff, you're going to use Monero. And the branding war, they really won out on that one.
correct. But I do think that, I mean, first of all, I'm not particularly bothered with exchanges using our transparent transactions because, first of all, when
Hmm.
someone's depositing into it, well, the source is hidden, right? I mean, you
Hmm.
can still do your private transactions. So what if you can see the money that's entering the exchange? Maybe that's a good thing for certain things, like
Hmm.
these are mostly centralized exchanges. You want to kind of know how much money they have, how much money
Yeah.
they have locked up and stuff like that. And there shouldn't be an expectation of privacy when you're dealing with a centralized exchange.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of like the best of both worlds. Of course, this is an experiment. I don't know of any other project that has gone this route of privacy on by default with transparent opt out. But I think it's a worthwhile experiment. But eventually, once we have
Hmm.
all the stuff down the road, we also have some engineering questions to solve. Like, how are we going to have master nodes with hidden amounts if we go full on Lelantus? That's something we have yet to figure out. I mean, there probably are
Hmm.
ways. We just haven't expanded. We would just want to launch Lelantus first and see how it goes rather than try to solve everything. but there are a lot of engineering stuff to go full on by default. But hopefully by then, if people recognize that our privacy is meaningful, then we'll be in a better negotiating position to move with privacy on by default, like mandatory. I mean, like you take
Mm-hmm.
a look at stuff like Pirate Chain, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Pirate Chain, which is like R, and then they're having like full Z to Z transactions. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's great for privacy. Of course, they didn't develop the tech themselves. It's more of a implementation thing.
Mm-hmm.
But they have been having, community based everything, but they're still having lots of problems with exchanges wanting to bother to even implement it. And that's with Zcash already doing a lot of the work with telling people how to support these transactions.
Mm-hmm.
But it's to me it's like you need to get big first before you have that
Mm-hmm.
clout to make exchanges do that. And we're also like right now we're also integrating into the DeFi space, where you can take your Zcoin and put it on Ethereum and do what you need to do on DEXs, and take collateralized loans and then move it back into Zcoin. Those all need the transparent transactions as well.
Mm-hmm.
So um it's going to be interesting where we see, to me, the end goal is privacy mandatory by default, but
Mm-hmm.
we'll see how it goes. I wouldn't dare to say, oh yeah, we're going to do it within 1 year or so, or something
Yeah,
like
it's a grand experiment. Now, when you're talking about exchanges,
that.
obviously exchanges have been, depending on where, have been a little bit more stringent with privacy coins or not accepting at all, and so that means that uh, there's fewer exchanges that will deal with privacy coins, which means there's less, I guess, probably less liquidity on the market. And do you see that as a de-anonymization issue, where eventually, say you have like three big exchanges that do almost all of the, let's just say, Zcoin trading, or and then when you have, then all of a sudden, well, like we were talking with CipherTrace, if they already have some piece of information and they think, all right, well, we know that this person operates in this geographical region, which means it's got to go through this exchange, and then they can just pretty much figure things out. So, do you think that that's going to be a problem for privacy, for advanced privacy techniques in the future when you have fewer exchanges supporting them?
I mean, definitely, whenever you are relying on centralized exchanges, whether whether you have a lot of them or not, is still going to be an issue, right? And you kind of at the whim and fancy of these centralized exchanges, and many of these exchanges will not fight for you
Mm-hmm.
if the government says, "Oh yeah, we're not comfortable with privacy. We haven't even passed the law, but we think that you should delist them," which is kind of what's happening in Korea and many other countries where it's not illegal, but it's just
Mm-hmm.
kind of like discouraged. And then people are like, "Oh yeah, we have a lot of other money to make from other blockchains. Let's just delist them because we can't deal with the regulatory headache," right? This happens with
Mm-hmm.
all privacy coins, and even some coins which don't actually have privacy and all, like Verge, right? There's no privacy over, or even Dash, where
Mm-hmm.
where it's kind of like Bitcoin. You guys
Yeah.
get delisted because you used to be called a privacy coin, right? It's all
Yeah.
about the form
Labels.
rather than the substance, right?
Yeah.
um so I kind of see that we kind of have to approach it on a two-prong kind of attack, right? One which is like, you have like top law firms tell you about how to comply, why it's okay to have privacy coin, which I think Monero is making, like, is going to be releasing this legal opinion soon, trying to engage with regulators. Actually, like, if CipherTrace does stuff for Monero and that helps adoption of Monero, that's actually a good thing, because
Mm-hmm.
in reality, even blockchain analysis is also probabilistic in many cases,
Yeah.
right? And it's just to give regulators that sense of control rather than actual controls. Like, I have some sight of it rather than I have no sight of it, which scares them, right? They say like, oh yeah, CipherTrace can do something with Monero, so we're okay. And exchanges like, oh yeah, we use CipherTrace, we're good, we're compliant. I don't think they
Yeah.
actually really care as to how
Yes.
amazingly effective it is, right?
And
Yeah.
the fun thing is, just when you say that, when there's a chance, a lot of people won't try to do things that would, get them in trouble with the government anyway. If they think, they said that they can track it. I don't know if they can, but just to be safe, I'm going to be careful. And it kind of like, it kind of it discourages the activity just by saying, you don't know what's going to happen. Like, okay, I
Yeah.
won't do anything. So, what do you think about privacy? I mean, I believe privacy is a fundamental human right, and I believe a lot of people that work with that do. What do you think of the state of privacy in the future? As far as, do you think it'll ever become an accepted kind of form of acting, or do you think it's trending the opposite direction to where eventually they'll just say, look, we as a government or regulator don't will not allow you to transact in a way where we cannot actually like trace what you're doing. Do you think it's going to go that way? Do you think we're going to get the other way, or do you think it's going to retain somewhere in the middle like it is now, where you can kind of have privacy if you fight for it, but if you do too many crazy things, then you might get extra scrutiny and things like that? What do you think is the outlook on that?
Well, right now, I mean, like, there's this really famous post by Multicoin Capital that talks
Mm-hmm.
about privacy as a feature rather than a product. That means like there's no room for privacy coins. You just build privacy as a feature on your blockchain. I beg to disagree because you can't optimize for everything. If you want to
Mm-hmm.
optimize for privacy, you can't do everything. I mean that to me is what it is. So without going too much down that path, but that's my point of view on that. But in terms of like who's going to win the battle, I mean, I'm hopeful that privacy coins hopefully take the same route as VPNs. Kind of
Mm-hmm.
like when I started a VPN company in 2007, it was freaking taboo. They're like, why do you want to hide your internet? And why do you want to hide your internet activity? You must be downloading porn or something like that. And in the early days of starting the VPN business, just from the basis of the support queries, I knew people were using it for torrents and stuff like that. But as time went by, especially in the past 5 years or so, you can tell that people are just using, I want privacy. I just don't
Mm-hmm.
want, like, I travel a lot. I want to do, you just see from the support queries, and that this privacy is like, it's just a regular thing. It's like your antivirus, right? It's just
Mm-hmm.
to protect yourself from your data from being leaked. And similarly, when you're doing transactions on the blockchain, there has to be that expectation that this information is not going to come back and screw you over, especially as these tools become more and more easily accessible to the public, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't ever, like if I have 100 Bitcoin in an address and I want to buy a coffee, if I send to you 0.001 Bitcoin, you immediately know I have 100 Bitcoin in this wallet, right? Or this
Because of the change
address,
address, right?
because of the change address. So
Mm-hmm.
why would I want to give out that type of information? So hopefully, I think if cryptocurrency takes off, I think
Mm-hmm.
privacy would take off. If it remains to be a speculative vehicle and money games and whatnot, then yeah, privacy doesn't really matter, right? But if it
Mm-hmm.
does take off as a real form of money,
Mm-hmm.
I do think privacy will automatically follow. I mean, no one wants to do transactions on the public blockchain if they're going to give information about themselves. Because if cryptocurrencies are already going to be mainstream, they're going to be people that are trying to go and analyze to get some data or advantage of you. Now it's just too small to even bother, right? But that's my personal point of view on that. And one of the things that I actually wanted to say, because I said, like, one way is to
Mm-hmm.
play nice with the regulators and stuff like that. The second thing that also ties into this question is the rise of decentralized exchanges, right? Where if I can trade privacy coins in a P2P manner on a decentralized exchange with no regulation whatsoever, it's going to be a lot harder for people to block it. And this is just like, I mean, take a look at what's happening on Uniswap right now, right? On Ethereum and whatnot. It's
Mm-hmm.
freaking like everything's being listed on there. It's going to be a regulatory nightmare. And I feel that regulators have to understand that if they ban it, they're going to lose more control. because all of this stuff are going to go on decentralized exchanges, on all this stuff that's a lot harder to control, as opposed to regulated exchanges where you can impose certain restrictions, KYC, AML, and whatnot. So hopefully, like the two prongs, that yes, explaining, educating the regulators, but also making yourself, growing faster than the regulation can keep up, so that they have to regulate around you rather than you have to comply with what they want. I mean, that's if Bitcoin, if Satoshi went to the regulator and say, I want to create Bitcoin, they would just say like, no, this is illegal, right?
Yeah.
But because it took off and it became like, oh my God, we can't really stop this. We have to regulate around it, right? I think that, or even Uber or Airbnb, I think that's the same thing. If you ask the regulator, could I do Uber or Airbnb, they would have just said no. But because they've already gained so much traction, that they have to regulate around it. And I think hopefully that's the case with privacy coins as well. And that's very dependent as to whether cryptocurrency takes off as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed that not only is the privacy coin label kind of not as important anymore because there's just so many of them, but then also you have projects like Litecoin's working on Mimblewimble, from what I hear. And I mean, it's not that low. I understand. We're not going too much that, but then Bitcoin Cash has a few different CoinJoin things on it, and then I didn't look into it until relatively recently, but there's quite a few interesting things on Bitcoin, which I don't know how they can afford to do coin joins at like $1 per transaction fee. But it seems like privacy in crypto is going up rather than down. Like it's becoming more popular. And
I definitely think so as well. Yeah.
I remember, and for those who, I remember for the longest time, I had an address that had a single public key, a single wallet, like single address to it. And so my wallet, it just like everything went in and out of this one address. And I remember when HD wallets came around and now you could have infinite receiving addresses. I was like, why do I have like a billion addresses? I didn't want this. I got mad at it. I just wanted to put it back into one address until I understood how it worked and stuff. And so just that improvement is such a huge, kind of improvement. Well, this has been a great chat. Where can people find more about you and the stuff you do?
Well, Zcoin.io, but we are going to do a rebrand in the next coming months. Totally no new name. So Zcoin.io for the now, which will probably redirect to our new brand soon. And it has all, we're really active on Telegram, Discord. It's all bridged together. And you can read our academic papers that we produce and what we're all about. So yeah, and I'm always available in the Telegram chats anyway. Yeah.
Interesting. Do you have any hint on what the name is going to be later, or is it still top secret?
It's 4 letters long, so just like Dash, but not that. But we have a .org domain. It's going to be related to our privacy mechanism, like burning stuff up. So I think that's a big hint. I'm really excited about it, and hopefully, there's no more confusion of what Zcoin is, and it's not a Zcash fault and stuff like that. But I think the launch of Lelantus and the rebrand is going to be good for us. Yeah, kind of like when you guys rebrand from Darkcoin, right? Like into Dash. I think that was a good move.
Yeah, and from Xcoin to Darkcoin to Dash.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then eventually we should just call it Cash. Or maybe we could get a larger market cap. We call ourselves Bitcoin Dash.
Oh gosh. We were joking and just say like, let's just mess everyone and just call ourselves Zcoin Cash, and everyone just gets confused, right?
Yeah, of course that happens. Well, anyway, thanks a whole bunch for chatting with me. I hope you have a good one.
Thanks, Joel.